Introduce Mr. Kim Stephenson to our webinar this evening. Kim is an occupational psychologist. He specialises in the psychology and neuroscience of personal finance, financial risk and decision making. Kim is the author of 2 books and he works in both the commercial and within charitable organisations. And I'm quite sure he'd be happy to hear from all of us at some stage in the future if you wanted to directly speak with him about the services that he provides. So over to you, Kim. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Libby. Right, I'm going to try to keep this within the hour, so people can get away and watch the end of the football if they want. No, it's more try and keep it to an hour because we said an hour and a half in total, and I want to leave time for Q&A. I think we're a small select group, but that's fine. What I'm going to do is cover 3 areas, or broad areas. First bit, cost of living crisis, impact on mental health, is going to be context. It's going to be quite a short section. Then activities that can improve financial well-being, reduce stress. That's going to be the main content of it. What I'm going to try and do is allow for the fact you probably are well aware of a lot of the stuff, so I'm trying to push it around the edges to see if I can find some stuff that's going to be particularly useful and maybe novel to you. Because I'm trying to go through it fast, I haven't put up masses and masses of references and things, so please contact me if you have to hire me or anything, but if you want resources, references, don't have time to ask questions, sources of information, whatever, recommendations for things, that's absolutely great because I want to hear from people because I want to find out whether I'm providing what's actually useful to people. Okay, so context setting. Oh, sorry, the other point, activities can improve, but also what I'm going to try and do is put out there some ideas that maybe would be new to you of how you can integrate the financial side and the work that you're probably already doing to improve things overall. So context, pre-pandemic, you know, you can see the figures are from 8-10 years ago, or 6 or 8 years ago. Organisations lost a lot of productivity. It cost the economy a lot. It cost people days off work. So obviously people aren't as productive if they're stressed about their finances. Pre-pandemic, it was, you know, before lockdown, before people were on furlough, etc., etc. So it's always been a problem. Mental health problems have always made it harder to keep on top. That's always been the case. Excuse me. And it's been a problem for organisations, and it's also been a problem for the individuals because the individuals know it's affecting their behaviour and their ability to perform in their job, but also to a large extent their ability to handle their own finances. Because, you know, that's a study, that isn't people saying it. Experiencing financial anxiety are slower to produce financial information. It was done in the context of work, but it applies to people's own finances as well. And based on those with basically definable, so they'd actually been diagnosed as having some clinical disorder, their spending patterns' ability to make financial decisions weren't as good. Now, if we move to post-pandemic, people are experiencing both mental health and debt problems. A lot of people. They're still costing the economy a lot. Dementia are more likely to have problem debt. So clearly they are having problems, more problems with the cost of living going up. And the saddest thing of the lot, because, you know, we've known for ages that mental health and debt problems are an issue. They cost organisations a lot of money. They cost the government a lot of money. They cost people a lot of money. But that false statistic, considering suicide, means it can cost lives. That is a really serious issue. And it's getting worse because people looking for money help is increasing massively. And this isn't something that's been flared up by media, the papers, social media. Oh, you know, it's an imaginary crisis. This is real. Talk Money Week stats, 1 in 5 want help. Got is that they're searching for help, but are they finding it? One of the points I'm going to come back to is, are they actually capable of using it if they get it? So it's becoming more problematic, more people seeking help. But their biggest worry is financial concerns. Next biggest, mental health. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of overlap there. But about a half, potentially getting on to almost 3/4 of the population with one or the other. And they're worrying every day. And they're worrying frequently. And as I say, it's not imaginary. 76% of adults reported the cost of living has increased. So all this makes it quite a problem. Again, the mental health issues are a big issue. You're twice as likely to rely on credit or borrowing to cover everyday spending. People don't have savings. A lot can't afford to save regularly. The thing is that is based on those with reported mental health problems. But the point is, we already know that it's not just clinical levels, it's subclinical levels as well. People are stressed, anxious, etc. They're actually more likely to have trouble. And we've known for years that mental health problems cause, difficulty with finance. So in that diagram, mental health issues cause greater financial stress. You can go into a spiral if you've already got depression or anxiety disorder or something. But the point is, most of us don't actually have a clinical diagnosed illness. What we do is have some money worries. So it's very easy for money worries, sort of top left of the circle, to cause stress. That causes a lack of focus, which means you can't concentrate so well. So you've got increased anxiety. That goes round, the decisions get poorer, it's greater financial stress, more depression, that causes more money worries, and it goes round and it can become a death spiral. Or it can flake off into mental health issues. But the point is, it's a two-way street. Mental health issues can cause financial problems, but financial problems can cause mental health issues. And whether they do or not, if you're just in that circle, your performance with your finances is probably going to continue to get worse. And where it shows up getting worse is in these areas. And the research has found that basically
Ian, I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
May I suggest that you turn off your camera because the sound quality is affected, I think, by the bandwidth. So I wonder if we could just try, if you switch your camera off, it might just help, because what's happening is you're sort of stopping for a second and then it starts again.
Right. Is that any better?
Oh, I don't know yet, because you haven't said enough for me to know.
Oh, right, sorry.
Yeah. Have you changed your Wi-Fi or something?
No, I thought I turned the camera off.
Oh, no, you're still, I can still see you. And now you've changed, you're not in slideshow anymore.
Right. Okay.
So
Hang on a
if
sec.
you,
Is that better?
yeah, I can't see you now. So
Yeah. Yeah. I turned the camera off. So
wonderful. Thank you.
is the sound quality better?
Yeah, I'll let you know if it's not. Thank you.
Thank you. Apologies for that, folks. I haven't had that problem before. Okay. So the problem that's come out from the research that people are having when they're having trouble with finance is basically short-term and long-term savings. So lack of an emergency fund, insufficient retirement, poor budgeting, money management. That's sometimes described as being credit. So using credit to buy essentials, food, etc. Except traps. And that's, you've probably, a lot of you will have seen that. It's the, as it says, wellbeing strategy from MAPS, which is effectively the government body dealing with it. And you can see that the four things there: nation of savers and future focus are short and long-term loans. Credit is obviously about credit and budgeting. Debt advice is about debt advice. The other thing they've added is financial foundations, which is about finance. Got two problems with that. One is that it's, as you can see, children and young people, which kind of means once you're over 18, they assume you know it all. Now, personally, I doubt whether the next generation is going to be better with their finances, because as I say, the focus is just on the kids. It's not on adults, so they don't have many role models. But the more important thing is it's all about finance purely as finance. And it kind of assumes that if you know about finance, that's going to change your behaviour. Now, the problem is giving people information. The evidence is that it doesn't change their behaviour. If you just give people information, they don't necessarily use it. You can know that something is unwise and still do it. Just because you're told, oh, this is the way to do things. People ought to save. They know that. Yeah, but they don't. They ought to have an emergency fund. Yeah, but they don't. Giving them information about how good emergency funds are doesn't actually make them change the behaviour. So, summarising, poor mental health has dire consequences in financial and particularly human terms. It's positively correlated with financial well-being. As your financial position improves, what tends to improve is your well-being overall and mental health problems. Similarly, if your mental health improves, if your ability to handle finance is better, then your financial well-being tends to do the same. The current financial crisis is creating justified fear, stress, anxiety. So there's threats there. There's the threat of humiliation, losing your house, going into debt, shame, etc. Human response to a threat evolved for physical threats. So it means fight, run, or hide right now. Because of that, we get those threats, which are social threats, like humiliation, like being ashamed. We still react to them. So the problem is you can't fight the bank manager. You can't run away from a letter from a creditor. Well, you can try. You can hide your bank statement showing you're in the red. Or you can hide them from your partner. But it doesn't actually work. But that's the natural human reaction to a threat, for whatever threat it is. So that means forward planning and rational thinking are very difficult because your brain is basically pre-programmed to deal with an immediate threat, which would be a physical threat, and do something now, not next week, because by next week you would be dead with a physical threat. So our brains don't naturally go to that unless we train them to do it. For most, some people are lucky, they just cope with it, but most of us don't. But we need that planning and rational thought for debt, savings, credit, money management. And the other slightly tricky thing is that we're unique. Even identical twins are unique, and they have different priorities, needs, circumstances. So we want all the same, we don't all want the same things. And the same, so, you know, teaching people about financial facts isn't necessarily going to help all people. The consequences, we need to control credit and debt, etc. We've got those fundamental needs. We have to provide for our survival and basic needs, and we've got other wants and nice to haves. But the trouble is, those are different for different people, because my need might be your, well, it's not even a night, you don't care, and vice versa. So if we're going to change things, you need to have advice, help that's flexible, that doesn't assume everybody's going to be the same. We need to look after both mental and financial health, and they are inextricably linked, but trying to do just one at a time, therefore, is pretty crazy, because you're going to affect both anyway. We react to stress in evolved ways, which doesn't really work in modern life, but people tend to need to learn that their finances as well, because they can't think straight without that. So it means we have difficulty planning, organising, making rational decisions. And it means that a lot of our handling of money, however much information we have, however much is thrown at us, you know, we can be I mean, you've seen this with, you know, banks in 2008, you've seen it with chancellors in the last year. We make irrational money decisions. It doesn't really matter how much we know about it in theory, how much information we have, particularly, as my colleague Prati Sirama says, the issues are not logical, they're psychological. So a couple of things that come out of those consequences. Uniqueness means it's not possible to give the same solution to every individual. So solutions need to address the circumstances, and it's not one size fits all. The problem tends to be that most advice is all about the money. It theory, which works on averages, but nobody's average. You know, nobody has 1.8 children and lives in a 2.3 bedroom house. So that doesn't really work terribly well. Excuse me. Now, it does sound sensible to some extent to focus on the money, because we're talking about money. We're talking about financial well-being. So doing psychological stuff sounds a bit namby-pamby. The thing is, if you think of tyres on a car, you can say, well, okay, the car's not going, so we need to change the tyres, because they're a car's contact with the ground. That's peachy, but what if it's not the tyres that are at fault, or the tyres and something else are at fault? You can take analogies too far, but money's the interface we have with the world. Advice at the moment tends to be very much, oh, you've got to focus on the money, you've got to teach people how to handle the money, because that's the interface. But the money's handled by the person. It's a bit like if you change the tyres and fill that car with diesel in the picture, off you go, but it's a petrol car with a faulty ignition. It won't actually go anywhere. You can't use the new tyres or that fuel. If you fix the actual problem, which is the steering, and it's the huge, it's basically the engine of it, they can maybe change the wheel, or at least they can help you source a wheel for them. If they need something, they can go and buy petrol that works with the car. They can do it themselves. And the big point about that is they can fix it in the future. Whereas if you supply them with tyres and you provide all that sort of thing, yeah, it's fine if the future problem is just fixing tyres. They know what to do. But if the problem is anything, they've got to ask for help every time they have a problem. You haven't set them free to solve their own problems in future. So it does need, ideally, both elements. It's not just financial information. They need help with what I've described as mental bandwidth to deal with the stresses, to be able to make reasoned decisions. Just improving the mental side isn't going to be enough. I want to drive a car with flat tyres. They might be happy, they might have greater well-being, and they might still be in well-being when they've lost their house and they're living at the council dump or something. But that's not what we want. So it's not that finance is not important, and I'm going to cover some ideas about that later. But the fact is that if you just do the financial stuff, then you're missing a huge chunk of it. So ideally, it wants both. There is still a perception that anything, mindset, resilience, attitudes, too warm and fuzzy. And like I say, that attitude's understandable. It kind of makes sense, and it's very well intentioned. But the evidence is that it doesn't work. Not saying it never works. Sometimes you give people financial advice and they pick it up and run with it and never look back. But there's good data that, as I said, information thrown at people doesn't really alter their behaviour. People do the new things for a while and then they revert to what they did before. That's one of the reasons why it doesn't work, why giving up smoking doesn't work. People are being told to do something new and it kind of makes sense to them, but it doesn't actually change the way they think about it. So in the end, they revert to normal, which is what got them into the trouble in the first place. And that's a very common thing with that. You see the same people going back to Citizens Advice Bureau, for example, or Citizens Advice, as it is now. And then, they're going back year after year because the way they think about money. Basically, what I'm saying is talking just about money, or to a certain extent just about the financial stuff, is a bit like giving a man a fish. It's great, you feed him for a day, but if you teach him to fish, and basically if you're going to give him something, give him the information about how to fish and give him a fishing rod. So it's maybe a facility to get money, use it properly, you feed him for life. So what you're trying to do, got a couple of slides about things that you can do within organisations that are going to help. What you're trying to do is create a mindset, because that if you can get people in the right headspace, they're going to be so much better in terms of well-being, but also in terms of their ability to handle their money. So space for people to talk about money. It does tend to be a taboo. There was some lovely research done 20 odd years ago with university students, and they asked them, would you be happier talking about this wild sex you're going to have after you've had a romantic meal together, or would you talk about how you're going to split the bill and how you're going to pay for the romantic meal before you go and have sex? And naturally enough, they were all very happy to talk about details of the sex in graphic detail. It was like blood from a stone to get them to talk about money. So it's difficult to do that. If you can create within the company that if you're going to do it, it needs to be confidential, because people need to trust. Because although there shouldn't be a stigma to having debt, in the same way there shouldn't be a stigma to having mental illness, there is. So they've got to know that their confidences are going to be kept. It's probably not enough in most companies. I've never seen one where it is just to have people available to talk to if you want to, because it means people have got to take the initiative and it's scary. So reach out, signpost it. If you've got helplines, webinars, whatever, make sure that people know about it and tell them about it. It may help to register and provide a facility for registering with the vulnerability registration service. That's, if you don't know of it, it's like a one-stop thing. And basically it prevents people who have financial problems having to go to 2-3 banks and go through this humiliating thing of explaining their situation and why they can't pay back and asking for time and yada yada yada. So it takes some of the pain out of it. If you're going to do that in-house, it's a good idea to have somebody who knows about it on the staff or on the consultants that you use, so that they can walk people through it. Theoretically, you can go on the website and log on and it's quite easy. That's the theory. In fact, people tend to find that quite tricky, because they're stressed. It all seems like a huge problem. So help them to do it. And basically it's creating support for people. Said about reducing the stigma. There is give positive examples and normalise the issues. So if you can talk about public figures who earn huge amounts of money but have had financial problems, people who are rich but have gone bankrupt, it's, that's what happens. If you've got somebody in the organisation who doesn't mind talking about it, who's on a big salary. There was a survey done, I mean, how the hell they got people to answer truthfully, I don't know, but they did a survey about 5 just before COVID. And it was including people who were earning over 60,000, which is well over twice the national average at that time. And about 15% of them worried about their income and have they got enough, and they haven't got enough savings. And they were worrying on a sort of monthly basis about it. Every time they got paid, they thought, oh God, I haven't got enough money. And they were earning huge amounts of money, relatively. So if you can get somebody in the organisation or get stories of that, normalises that. It becomes less scary for people to admit, yeah, I have a problem. If you can't provide help, at least provide listening, because it's a trouble shared is a trouble halved. If people know they're not being judged, again, it's building an air of confidence about the company cares about them, even if we don't have anything to offer. We hope we do, but we're going to provide a service that at least allows you to share some of that concern. So it's not building up in your head. It's giving people a bit more mental resilience. What I'm going to do, just talk about some key points of integrating things, and then go back and forwards between integration and the interventions that you can make. One thing that I think is quite good, I haven't put lots of details up there, but if it's of interest, let me know, because there was some work I did with Toynbee Hall, which is a charity, a few years back, and we were talking about, it was called financial triage and concierge. And basically the triage is on the basis, those of you who've worked in DM, you have a contact point. So it can be a department, an individual or whatever. I was at a talk that Aston University's financial services or financial wellbeing unit did. And there was a guy there from Tim, or actually the chairman of Stephenson, and they have somebody, I think it's Janet, who everybody knows to go to about financial, and she knows all the resources they have, so she can. That's a triage principle. So if you have something where people can go in, you've got a single point of contact, and they can pass people on. You've then got a simple way. People don't have to hunt round, and they don't talk to somebody. Oh yeah, I think we do a pension. Oh, you probably need to talk to accounts. Or oh yeah, we've got a EAP scheme. I think it's HR. Yeah, I mean that is just going to put people off. It's going to increase their stress levels. Something, you create an atmosphere of trust. You can get people coming forward, and you're telling them about it. You're going out proactively as well, but they know you're putting the information out. They can go confidentially. They can talk to somebody who might not have all the answers themselves, but they'll know, okay, what can we provide you? Who do you need to speak to? What forms do you need to fill in? And somebody will hold their hand, because it makes it much easier for them to get. With that sort of support, I'm going to talk about some of the psychological things, positive psychology. I mean, a lot of you may know a lot about this anyway. But as I say, I'll talk in more detail. Basically, positive psychology information, interventions come in really useful. You might find if you've got an employee assistance program, you might be able to get some of them through. But a lot of it will be other sort of less expensive, if you like, interventions and things that you may do anyway. One thing that you can provide is money coaching, financial literacy. I mean, these are all more directly money related. Basically, a lot of money coaching, financial literacy is more about finance, very much on a how-to basis. It's not just informational. It could be workshops, seminars. You could put it on the internet. You can have little workshops, courses. It can also be done, ideally it's done one-to-one, because that's easier to tailor it, because everybody's slightly different, but that is obviously a higher cost option. It's usually basics of finance. So one thing, it's usually pretty obvious. People know they need to make a budget, and they kind of know they have to put all bank account details together, and that's what scares them and they don't do it. But some people do actually have a problem thinking, oh, what do I need to, what paperwork do I need to find? So if somebody's there to show them, and somebody's there to show them how to work out a budget, then that can be really helpful. Now, normally, in my experience and from the research, the problem is more that they can't bring themselves to do it. It's a psychological problem. It's like, with trying to lose weight, everybody knows you exercise more and eat less, and that sounds pretty easy, but people can't do it, not because they're stupid, but because their brains don't work like that. Overcoming the fear of finding out how horrible your financial situation is quite a good motive for people not to do it and to say, oh, I don't know how. So giving them help, and that might be all they need. If you can help them to sort that, so might not need much psychological input. It won't usually, but if you can provide, ideally, coaches or workshops facilitated by people who've got a reasonable knowledge of both, then you can help the people who can do the financial stuff given a bit of advice. You can also start working on the psychological side to get people to be able to tackle it and to release the intelligence that they've got, because it's the fear and the confusion and the stress that stops them performing well. With loan schemes, what you basically need with that is, I mean, you're not going to add them at this time. You know, companies can't afford to add stuff they don't have in all probability. If you work with an organisation that does, good for you, you know, full marks, because it'd be lovely if people did, but most companies have suffered as much as the staff. So it's probably going to be things you've already got, but make sure that your contact point, whoever's doing the triage and whatever, whoever's involved with it, does understand what you do, and they know where to go or where to send people, and you've got people there who can help take people through the process. Because however simple it is, it's like, you know, a lot of the government websites, they're pretty good now. But if you're under stress, it's very easy to get upset. And if you want to know that, if you imagine, you know, anytime you've been on a website and you've discovered that, you know, you need your national insurance number and you don't have it with you, and, you know, you try and sign in on your phone and you don't have a note and whatever it is, and you'll find that the natural reaction is you just want to throw it away. Or you want to hit somebody because you're angry, or you don't know what to do. And it's the run, freeze, fight thing. That's what happens when people are confused. So if you can avoid them getting confused, it's a lot better. Debt advice, key thing there is it's obviously going to be outside agencies, because, I mean, if you probably almost certainly not going to have somebody in-house who's skilled in that area. Big thing is make sure it's a charity, because what will happen and does happen, and it's a disaster, is that there's on the TV to do debt reconciliation and debt advice and this, that and the other, and they advertise in papers and whatever. And basically they're making a living out of doing it. So the only way they're going to do that is take money off people. And they're people who are in debt already, so they can't afford it. That's how people get into really serious debt. So you do not want anybody doing that, because that is A, financially suicidal for them, and mentally it's suicidal for them. So make sure it's going to a charity. Make it easy, give it, etc. It often means it's a really good idea with debt advice to get some of the psychological support going for them, because that having debt is a very, very stressful situation. So however easy you make it, a lot of people are going to fall by the wayside because they just find it impossible to do even the simplest things. One point with that, if somebody's you know, in danger, because that's one of the points of triage, is that you take people in and you help direct them, but you also help them start unpicking what the problem is. So if they've got a problem long term, they can't manage to prioritise short term and long term savings, financial information isn't going to help them much, but a lot of psychological type stuff will, because it helped them work out what they really want and what their priorities are in the short and long term. In other situations, they might be about to lose their house. In that case, you know, supporting their mental well-being is not as relevant as so they need to get some money straight away, or they need to stop anybody proceeding against them. And there is a scheme called Breathing Space. I mean, officially it's the Debt Respite Scheme, but if you want to Google it, just put in Breathing Space. It basically gives a truce for a given period, so the creditors can't pursue them and they can't add interest on for that space, but it doesn't pay the bill, so the problem's still there. The idea is to give people time to get their charity and whatever, and get the debt repayment program or voluntary voluntary liquidation, whatever, bankruptcy into place. But it's useful if you've got that sort of thing going on, if you've got that hiatus in proceedings, to work on the mental side as well to give them more resilience, because it's going to be a struggle for them, and is not going to be a magic panacea. So again, working on both sides of it is really helpful. Pensions, I mean, in general, the advice is always join the scheme. Because very hard pressed to find a better way of saving, because apart from anything else, you get tax relief. To think funds are growing tax free, and you got contribution from the employer. They're not as complicated as they used to be. Another sort of tick for the government there, because they have made it a lot easier. I mean, you have to remember the human brain is the most complex single entity in the universe. So pensions and financial are complex in a way, but compared to what we've got between our ears, they're that simple. However simple they've made the pensions, it's still quite complicated for people who are stressed. So it's handy if you've got somebody who can talk things through with them. You might find people want to do it themselves, and they may well be perfectly capable of doing it themselves, and that's great. I would generally encourage people, if they possibly can, to be a member of the pension scheme. To the extent the setup is now, because of the research on it, you opt out of a scheme rather than opt in. It used to be when I were a lad and I was a financial advisor, you didn't join the scheme, you had to elect to join, and you had to fill forms in and jump through hoops of fire, and it was terribly complicated, and we made a lot of money as advisors helping people do that. It's gone the other way now. You automatically, generally, you've got to be offered the chance. You automatically be in the scheme until you can fill the forms in to drop out. Now, because is in real trouble. The problem they've got is that, say they're putting £50 a month into a pension, it doesn't sound a lot. Actually, it's £50 that's effectively going to come off their credit card because they don't have the money. So probably in their interests to opt out temporarily, pay the credit card down so they're not paying 23-25% interest. And then when they've got money that's neutral, they can start earning on it. But if they try and start earning on it while they're still losing more, they're digging this, which is where having somebody doing the triage and having an idea of both the psychological side and the financial side is really handy, because you don't need great technical knowledge of either. You don't need to be a qualified therapist. You don't need to be a qualified financial advisor. As long as you know the way the company works, what the contribution rates are, what extra things you can get, you're fine. But it's a huge help to people, and you make sure that as many people as possible are getting the benefit, but nobody is getting absolutely caned because of, you know, perfectly well-meaning automatic things that nobody's watching over, and they've the wrong option. Because for most people, it's right. As I say, there's no averages. So it's, you know, I would say it's probably the most important thing you can do with finance is to be there, be the contact point, so you can make sure that people are getting it right. Employee assistance programs, you may have one, you may not. Again, a bit like loan schemes and things. If you haven't got one, I doubt that any company is going to fork out for one. If you don't know about them, you could say look it up. But I mean, basically, their arrangements, generally you get something like 6 sessions of counselling. There were quite a lot of them around, but the take-up was very low. I averaged about 8 or 10%, but sometimes it was as low as 1 or 2%. That's partly because, as I said, sadly, there is a big stigma about mental health, and they're generally designed for people with discernible mental health issues. rather than being a bit stressed. But it depends on the scheme. The other thing is they were poorly understood. People didn't really know what the hell they were getting, and they were appallingly badly advertised. You know, there was no proactive use of it. You had to sort of find the right office and go and look in a locked cupboard to find any details, which isn't the best way to get any benefit used. If you've got one, then apart from sorting out, you know, what do people get and how does it work, it's worth checking from a financial point of view what they will do, because if counsellors are using some schools of therapy, which I'll come to in a sec, they may well be able to help with the psychological side of the money. So rather than just, you know, making people deal with phobias or whatever, they might be able to help with, like, overcoming the fear of asking for a loan, or just the mental confusion of trying to do all your budgeting or something. There are now some groups of therapists under EAP schemes who will do that. And if you've got that, that's great. Other ones, perfectly legitimately, it's not a, you know, there's no good or bad about it. But I've spoken to some EAP providers and they do not want their therapists to do that. You know, as far as they're concerned, it's non-directive therapy. They shouldn't give people help to solve specific issues. They're supposed to, you know, allow the person to go where they want, sort of thing. So it's worth checking on what that's about. Couple of things that can help overall well-being and also the financial resilience. Said about headspace, one of the big ones is mindfulness. There's huge numbers of benefits to that have been shown from the research. I've just picked a few out because they are particularly useful in terms of, you know, financial well-being. A lot of people think, I said earlier on, some of the psychological stuff people think is very wishy-washy and actually mindfulness, it's been used by emergency services in the military. If you want to Google it, I mean, if you drop me a line, I can send you some stuff, you know, links to things. But if you Google it, there's brilliant study on firefighters. You know, it's where it's life or death decisions, and people have, you know, are under incredible life or death stresses, and it's their functioning is better, their quality of attention is better. The Navy SEALs in the US Army are, again, standard part of their training now is a mindfulness practice. And they've used them for snipers as well, because they are better. I mean, that is a fairly high pressure job. They perform better. So if it works for that, I could say, well, surely it would work. Yeah, I know it works because I've used it and I've used it with clients, and it does improve quality of attention. People are better able to focus. It also, I mean, another useful one there, helps overcome insomnia, which is very common with money worries. You lie awake. Well, if you can get some quality sleep, your thinking will improve. Therefore, your money handling will improve. And interpersonal behaviour. I mean, the number of rows over money, according to Relate, it's the major issue, you know, above sex and in-laws in marital breakups, is financial arguments. Well, if you can have better interpersonal behaviour, you're likely to have a row about your money. Self-compassion is another one. Neff et al. If you look up, I mean, again, drop me a line and I can send you some specific stuff, but Kirsten Neff and Chris Germer are the leading people on that. That is really useful. in terms of guilt and shame. And the classic thing is that people will, they'll have a tough week, and they've been really good. They've sorted the finances out. They have a tough week. They go out and have a rotten day, and coming home, they see something they really fancy, and they go in and buy it because that's their way of getting relief. And they get home and they think, I'm never going to wear this. It's crazy old to take. Oh, I'm so stupid. Why do I do this? And it's the thing of, you have one drink. Okay, I'm not supposed to have a drink. I'm an alcoholic. Oh, fine, I've blown it. I might as well go and get drunk. Losing weight. Oh, I've had a cream cake. I've broken my diet. Forget it. You're beating yourself up. Like, you're stupid. No, you're not stupid. You're human. And self-compassion is about saying, yeah, okay, I fell off. I'll get back on again. This is not the end of the world. It's treating yourself as you would treat a good friend. If a friend, made a mistake, you'd say, it's a mistake. It doesn't mean you're an idiot. It doesn't, mean anything. You've made good progress. Just keep going. You've had a little setback. That's fine. But a lot of us find it difficult to be self-compassionate. So actually practicing that, and there are methods to do it, and you can teach them. Yeah, you may be qualified in that already, but you can get people to do it. You can get free meditation things, and apps and all sorts. There's any amount of stuff under there. It doesn't have to cost much, but it can substantially improve things. But you do, with both of them, do kind of need regular practice. So if it can be offered within the workplace or supported within the workplace, you can have self-help groups, you can have all sorts of stuff. That's really helpful. Specific therapies, said about this is usually what you'll get in EAP, is one of these sort of things. You're probably familiar with it. CBT is the standard one that's offered in the NHS. REBT is similar but slightly different. Basically, both of them work with negative emotions such as guilt, shame, self-esteem issues, and they work by challenging the thought patterns. So a bit like I gave the example for I've completely lost my thread there. Self-acceptance. Basically, you're saying, well, how would you treat a friend like that? I'm beating myself up. I'm feeling guilty about this. Is that helpful? It's challenging the thoughts. The mindfulness-based therapies like ACT and MBSR work in a slightly different way. They're doing the same things, but rather than challenging the thoughts, they're about accepting, well, okay, I'm feeling really lousy, I'm feeling stupid, I'm feeling angry, whatever it is. I can't get control of my thoughts. That's okay. I can still do useful things. I can still move forward. There isn't one that's better than the other. It's, again, it's different strokes for different folks. But those are the typical ones that you will get in EAP schemes. But also, I would say that, obviously there are loads of other, there's Jungian analysis and God knows what. I don't know of any evidence that they actually help with finance, but there is a lot of evidence that things like ACT and CBT, some of them have been the subject of studies in actual financial well-being, or certainly in terms of thought and being able to make decisions under pressure. And they both work, so they're worth considering. It's also worth considering learning some of the techniques of them. You don't have to be a qualified therapist, but using some of the techniques to help people to learn to handle their money better, to give themselves some headspace so that they can then absorb the information you're giving them about money is really handy. Mentioned meaning therapy there, basically because meaning has proved to be one of the most important things in a worthwhile life. Now, it's not something people at the emergency end of financial well-being, so the ones who are in danger of losing their home or have got excessive debts or have no emergency savings, no pension, whatever. But if you've got people who are okay, but they're kind of feeling, well, I think I could do more, but I don't quite know. I don't want to just buy things. I'm not quite sure where I go with my money. I'm sure I should be doing better, but I don't know what better would look like. Then meaning therapy is actually quite a good way to look at it if people don't want to do it, because I don't know that there's going to be any EAP schemes or anything, so it's unlikely to be free. There's a couple of very good books on that, which again, if it's of interest, get in touch and I can give you some references and book references and stuff. Some things that can improve mental well-being, reduce stress. These are activities that you can organise, so it can be suggested and supported, but also people can go off and do for themselves. I mean, there may be ones that you would find useful if you're the sort of person who might be interested in meaning therapy. If you're okay, you're not really worried, but you kind of think, well, maybe I could do better. One of the things is finding out what money means to you. There's lots of techniques for that. Again, let me know if it's of interest. One thing you can do if you want is look up, oh crikey, it's financial life planning. There's a bloke called George Kinder, Kinder. You might find there's some questions that he asks that are useful. There are loads of others. I just put that because I know that's easily available. Do a money diary. Write the motivations behind the transactions. Because if you start finding, well, I'm buying this stuff, I'm actually wasting this money because I'm competing with the bloke up the road, or I'm trying to impress my parents that I'm better than, I've got more stuff than my siblings, therefore I'm more successful, or to impress the kids' parents, kids' friends' parents or something. But then maybe it's, well, actually, I'm really interested in this, so it's not wasted money. I'm developing myself in a way that I want to. Great. Tackle money, shame, empathy, compassion towards oneself. So the self-compassion stuff is useful because we all make mistakes. And if you beat yourself up, it doesn't help. But if you can have compassion and treat yourself like a good friend, that's great. Breaking conventions. I mean, at home, that can be talking to the kids and your partner, but it can also be in the workplace. Breaking down the taboos. It's okay to talk about it, It's actually generally more interesting finding out about how people pay for their lifestyle than it is about what they're doing in the bedroom. But it doesn't matter, there is this air of secrecy about it. So if you can break that down, either in the home or both in the home and in the workplace, it's great. Learning to create a mental breathing space, things like mindfulness. I mean, seriously, it's really useful. There's very few people for whom it doesn't work. It's not going to work for everybody because nothing does. But the majority of people find it's useful. You do have to stick to it. You're not going to learn a language or learn to play an instrument in 10 minutes. But if you keep with it, little bits each day, you suddenly find, I say suddenly, after a month, 2 months, 3 months, whatever, you find that actually situations that used to really stress you out don't so much. Decisions don't stress you so much. It's a bit easier to make decisions, to prioritise properly. It helps, and you can help other people to do it too. Work out what you want your money to do for you, what life you want. I mean, that's where like meaning therapy comes in, because a lot of people flog their guts out to earn more money. When they get it, they don't really know, they're still no happier because they didn't really know what they wanted. Whereas other people, you know, whether they make loads of money or not, they actually enjoy their life, because what money they've got, they spend on things that they actually value. And then I've put that in. It doesn't hurt to know about money. It doesn't hurt to give people financial information. It's just that that's not the key thing, I would say. The psychological side is more important because that's what makes the decisions. But knowing about finance, well, it just gives you extra stuff. If your head's in the right place, to a certain extent, the more you know, the better you're going to be. But it is hitting a balance. And I would urge you, not either for yourself or for anybody you're working with, or organisations, to say, oh, financial literacy is the important bit. Let's teach them all about money and ignore the rest of it because it's too wishy-washy, because it isn't. You know, that they're both important. Finally, I will bung in two little things that probably are too much for anybody you're working with who's in a real bind financially. But because basically gratitude, if somebody's about to lose their house, asking them to be grateful that they're still alive is not really going to cut it. But the quote there, enhances cognizance. It just makes you smarter. You get more out of the day. You appreciate more, and you derive more pleasure from social relationships. You also derive more pleasure from stuff you've got. So yeah, if you're really on your beam ends, that's not going to help a great deal. But if somebody's feeling good, but they've got the thing that they could feel better, then a gratitude practice can help you thrive. You know, as distinct from you're going to being ill to being surviving, this is the sort of things you're doing to go from surviving to thriving to flourishing to feeling great rather than okay. Similarly, savouring, that's really interesting, because one of the things about it is that it's very easy for people to, as I said, do the retail therapy thing. You buy something and then regret it, because you buy it because you get a little flood of endorphins, you get this little happiness burst, and that's what you remember. Well, if you can learn to savour what you've got, savour the fun of saving up for something, it's proven, but sounds a bit wishy-washy, but it is true. If you anticipate, you get this long thing of feeling in control, and you haven't given in to your impulses, and you're feeling pretty good, and you're going to get this thing, and when you get it, you're going to have earned it, and it feels great, and you're going to carry on being happy. And you get there, and that does work, and you've had like 6 months of happiness, whereas you would have had. But there's also the point that you get there and you think, actually, I've got this money. I don't really want that anymore. I've had all that fun out of it and I haven't even had to pay for it. Great, I've now got money for a holiday. But as I say, those are fantastic if you're already in a reasonably good place and you want to get to an excellent place. They're not so useful if you're down in the doldrums. So basically, that's it. Thank you very much for your attention. Those are contact details. As I've said, special thanks to Pragnya, who's a colleague and basically a lot of the data she supplied, a lot of the ideas she supplied. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Kim. If you want to stop sharing and then we can see and put your camera back on, we'll give that a go now. A couple of things that stood out for me. I think it was a great point that you made, that knowing about finance doesn't always change the behaviour. And I think you're spot on. I think that's really relatable. So information doesn't automatically mean that you're going to start saving and have an emergency fund. There's a bit of background noise, Kim. If I invite you to mute yourself until you're answering questions.
Right.
Thank you. And I think it was great that you spoke about what activities can improve mental well-being and reduce stress. And I like there's some real practical things that you shared that we might be able to take back as occupational health practitioners into our workplaces. So creating that safe space where there's some trust, where people feel able to reach out. I think that's really important. I really like the idea of financial triage and there being somebody in the organisation that, you know, is sort of the key holder to lots of useful resources. And you know, the organisation being proactive about it. And I really hope that at the moment some organisations are doing this. And I think the other great point and advice you gave was to make sure that any debt advice comes from a charitable organisation. Really good one to take away. I'll be going to have a look at breathing space as well, which was, you mentioned, that's where we can go to explore taking a pause from our payments. So over to the rest of the audience. Any questions you'd like to ask, please unmute yourself. In fact, probably if you use the reactions button, you can put your hand up just in case there's more than one. Any comments or questions? I think Janet's gearing up, looking for her unmute button. Oh, Catherine Ty, would you like to go ahead? Catherine, unmute yourself.
Hi, Libby. Hi, Kim. I'm sorry, but your voice faded out whilst you were explaining why it's better to use charities for debt advice. So do you mind just briefly recapping on that?
Yeah, oh, I'm sorry. I didn't realise it had cut off. I am sorry. Yeah, the point is basically the charities they're charities. They're not for profit, so there can be a bit of a wait for them to do it. I mean, step change is like the big most official one, but the point is it's free at point of use. The problem is what happens is if you're working in the organisation and people are struggling, they don't know, if you can put the word out, you're the person to talk to, or the triage person, the contact point, whatever, you can make sure they go to one of those, even if there's a bit of a wait, and you can use the breathing space and you can help them to sort things out. And maybe in the meantime, while they're getting the debt things sorted out, when they've got a bit of a pause, they can you can work with them on mindfulness, or cheering them up, get them into a better place, so that when the charity advisor gets them some sort of plan to get out of trouble, they've got more headspace to deal with it. The problem is if you don't do that, they will probably do what most people do, ask their mates, and their mates, somebody will have seen an ad on television or a thing in the papers about, oh, we do debt advice, we do voluntary bankruptcy, we do arrangements with your creditors, we'll handle it all. Yeah, but they're commercial companies. It costs a lot of money to advertise on TV. Where do you think the money comes from? So the basic issue is, if they're left to their own devices, that's why there's so many blooming companies offering loans. I mean, before they banned payday loans, you think of Wonga and all the rest of it, how much was going on TV advertising. They don't pay that money out. Commercial companies don't pay that money out unless they're making a hell of a lot more. Where's that money going to come from? It's going to come from the people who are in debt, because they're desperate, and they'll go to anybody who's going to offer to help them. It's pretty obvious from my voice and my facial expression. It makes me angry that people are allowed to do that, but they are. And the trouble is that people, it's not that they're stupid, it's not that they don't know enough about money, it's that they're desperate and they're following the human thing of running, hiding, trying to get an instant solution, instead of taking some time and getting good advice and getting their head right, they desperately want to solve it, so they get a payday loan, or they go to somewhere where they promise to sort their loans out for them with no hassle and it's all going to be done instantly. And that just isn't true. It doesn't happen.
Thanks.
Sorry, does that?
Wonderful.
Yes, thanks. I mean, one of the things you didn't say that I'm curious about is also around sort of utility bills are a huge challenge for people right now. Do you recommend that people go direct to their suppliers when they're in trouble, or to gain advice first? Particularly with the risk of being changed over to a prepayment meter or whatever.
You're on mute, Kim.
Silly me, thank you. Yeah, it's a tricky one. I mean, the thing is that that's one of the ones where individual circumstance is really important. Not only because, obviously, depending on which firm you're with. I mean, I'll just give you a personal thing. I'm with Utility Warehouse. They've been absolutely good as gold. You know, I would recommend them, which I'm kind of doing now, but I haven't had any problems. But if I had a problem, I'm confident enough and I know enough about it, and I trust them enough to go straight back to them and say, look, you know, not happy about this, what are you going to do about it? A lot of people don't know enough, more in the sense that they don't have the confidence to deal with the sort of BS that people come back with. So generally, it is an individual choice, but I think if people are, I have no doubts about what I would do. But if people are in any doubt, I think it's a good idea to get some advice. To see, am I going a bit over the top here? Am I getting angry about something that actually, this is perfectly reasonable, I'm just upset because it's costing me money? Or alternatively, am I just acceding to this and it's unreasonable? It's to get a balance between, you know, being over aggressive and being a doormat, but also, what is the better thing to do here? Should I try and negotiate with them, or should I actually speak to a charity about it, or should I speak to my MP, or should I go to, you know, a citizen's advice or whatever to act as an intermediary for me? Because if you get locked into fighting with a big company, that can be quite intimidating.
I'll pause you there, Kim, if I may, in the interest of timekeeping, because we are dead on 9 o'clock and it was a 75-minute session. So all that remains is to say a huge thank you to you, Kim, for your time this evening. Do please feel free to contact Kim, and I wish everybody a pleasant evening. Go and find out what the football score was. Don't tell us in case anybody doesn't want to know. Thank you, Kim.
Thank you so much, Kim. That was really interesting.
Thank you very much. Very good.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye.